In the heart of a dense, ancient forest stood a piece of wood unlike any other. It was large, gnarled, and twisted, with deep grooves and knots that seemed to form eerie faces when the moonlight struck it just right. The villagers from the nearby town had long avoided this part of the forest, whispering tales of the cursed wood and the malevolent spirit that was said to reside within it. One evening, a group of friends decided to venture into the forest, dismissing the old stories as mere superstition. They were drawn by the thrill of the unknown, eager to prove that the tales were nothing more than the product of overactive imaginations. As they journeyed deeper into the woods, the trees grew thicker, the air colder, and an unnatural silence enveloped them. Finally, they reached the clearing where the wood stood. It was larger than they had imagined, and its dark surface seemed to absorb the light of their lanterns. One of them, James, dared to touch it, brushing his fingers against its rough surface. The moment he did, a chill ran down his spine, and the wind began to howl through the trees. Suddenly, the faces on the wood seemed to shift, their features twisting into expressions of rage and despair. The friends backed away in horror, but it was too late. The ground beneath them trembled, and the wood began to crack open, revealing a dark, gaping maw. From within the wood emerged a figure, tall and shadowy, with glowing red eyes that pierced through the darkness. It was the spirit of the cursed wood, a vengeful entity bound to the forest by an ancient curse. The friends tried to run, but the trees themselves seemed to come alive, their branches wrapping around them, pulling them closer to the wood. One by one, they were dragged into the maw, their screams echoing through the forest. As the last of them disappeared into the darkness, the wood sealed itself shut, its surface once again smooth and unassuming. The forest fell silent, as if nothing had happened. The villagers noticed that the group never returned, but they said nothing. They knew the forest had claimed more souls, as it had done many times before. The wood and the forest remained, waiting for the next unfortunate souls to stumble upon it, forever hungry for the living. Weeks passed, and the disappearance of the friends became a mystery that haunted the town. Search parties were organized, but those who ventured into the forest returned empty-handed, their faces pale with fear. The townsfolk began to whisper that the forest was cursed, that the wood had claimed more victims, but they dared not speak these fears aloud. One night, Sarah, the sister of one of the missing friends, decided to enter the forest alone. She had heard the stories, but her desperation to find her brother outweighed her fear. Armed with only a lantern and a small knife, she set off into the woods. As she walked deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to close in around her, their branches clawing at her clothes and hair. The air grew colder, and the familiar sounds of the night crickets, owls, the rustling of leaves faded into an oppressive silence. But Sarah pressed on, her heart pounding in her chest, determined to find her brother. Eventually, she reached the clearing. The wood stood before her, its surface dark and foreboding. She could feel its power, a malevolent presence that seemed to pulse with life. Taking a deep breath, she approached it, her lantern held high. Suddenly, the faces on the wood began to shift, just as they had before. But this time, Sarah saw something else, a flash of movement within the wood, as if something were trapped inside. She took a step closer, and the faces contorted in agony, their mouths opening in silent screams. Before she could react, the ground beneath her feet trembled, and the wood split open, revealing the same dark maw that had swallowed her brother and his friends. But instead of retreating, Sarah stood her ground. She knew she had to face whatever was inside if she ever hoped to find her brother. As the figure from the wood emerged, its red eyes glowing with a fierce hunger, Sarah felt a wave of terror wash over her. But she did not run. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small vial of holy water, a gift from the town's elderly priest. She hurled the vial at the figure, and it shattered against its chest. The spirit let out a deafening scream, and for a moment, it seemed to waver, its form flickering like a dying flame. The faces on the wood twisted in agony, and the branches of the surrounding trees began to wither and fall. But the spirit was not defeated. It lunged at Sarah, its clawed hands reaching for her throat. In a final act of desperation, Sarah plunged her knife into the wood itself, driving it deep into the heart of the cursed tree. The wood shuddered violently, and the spirit let out a final, ear-piercing wail before it was sucked back into the tree, the maw closing shut behind it. Breathless, Sarah stumbled back, watching as the wood began to crumble. The once mighty tree, source of so much terror, now disintegrated into dust before her eyes. And as it did, the ground beneath it opened up, revealing a hidden chamber. Inside, Sarah found her brother and the others, unconscious but alive, their bodies entwined in the gnarled roots of the tree. With trembling hands, she pulled them free, dragging them one by one out of the chamber. As she did, the roots seemed to release their grip, the curse lifted at last. The villagers never spoke of the incident again, but they knew that the forest had changed. The once dark woods were now filled with light, the oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the place where the cursed wood had stood was now a clearing filled with wildflowers, a symbol of hope and renewal. But deep in the forest, in a place where no one dared to venture, there remained a single piece of the cursed wood, hidden beneath the earth, waiting for the day when it would rise again.